Yeah, let the big dog hunt. Hello again, everybody. Joe Staszak in the house with you. Time for another episode of Kallas Remarks with Joe Staszak. And, of course, the man to my right, left, if you are looking at the screen, he is the great Steve Kallas. How are you, Steven?
All good, Joe. Great to be with you as always.
You too. A lot of things going on. Just last night, it's Friday morning. It's September 4th. We've got a big weekend ahead of us, Labor Day weekend. A lot of things going on, getting crazy in the NHL. Let's start with those Philadelphia Flyers. Again, taking the Islanders to overtime, this time needing double overtime. They've won 3 overtime games and have kept their season alive. Carter Hart with over 50 stops last night. Your thoughts on the series so far?
It's just incredible because the Islanders are such a strong, later in the game, third period team. They've come back, from multiple goal deficits. And then you think in overtime they're going to win. And now the Flyers have won not 1, not 2, but 3 overtime games, including last night's double overtime. It's just incredible. And I think, as we've talked about for years, the Flyers finally have a goalie. And when he has to come up big, even if he gives up leads, he comes up incredibly big in these overtimes. And so it's a Game 7 coming, but the Flyers are 3-0 in overtime. I don't know if you're rooting for overtime in Game 7, but to me, that's not like an accident. 1 might be an accident, maybe 2, but 3 games in overtime. This guy is like stoning everybody. He's made some incredible saves, and he's the future, but the future is now for the Flyers.
Been unbelievable. And you know what I love about sports, Steve? I might have texted this to you before the third period. Entering the third period last night, Flyers down a goal. Like, it gave up a goal in the last minute. The Islanders had outscored the Flyers 10-3 in the third period. We know how dominant they have been in the third period. And overall, 21-6, they've outscored their opponents in the playoffs. They are a dominant third period team. Flyers get a break. Scotty Lawton from Claude Giroux, a little breakaway. He beats Varlamov, sends it to overtime. And then, anything can happen in overtime. And the Flyers kind of outlasted them. And they waited till the defenseman broke his stick. Kevin Hayes makes a nice play, sends it out to Provorov, and that's the ball game. Here we go.
Well, I thought it was an incredible. Kevin Hayes has been unbelievable for the Flyers. You might be able to argue he's the MVP.
Yeah.
Other than Carter Hart. But the pass that he made, because, as you're coming around the net, I think the goalie usually thinks you're taking the puck to the other side.
Yeah.
And instead, he throws it right out to Provorov, who's wide open. And that's an incredible shot. It looked at me like it might have hit the crossbar and come down over the goal, of course. But it was very high. And, in today's NHL, I think you pretty much got to go high all the time to score.
Yeah.
There was the real good chance that the Islanders had in overtime where Anders Lee on his backhand, now it wasn't his fault, but if he can lift that puck up, the game's over. But the puck was kind of a rolling puck. It was on his backhand. That would be a little too much. But my goodness, I thought it was an incredible pass by Kevin Hayes and an incredible shot. And we should also mention, of course, Oscar Lindblom coming back from bone cancer to actually play. I understand it's one thing you show up, you're practicing with a team, and that's great and gives you a lift. But to be on the ice, you start at the beginning, the place went nuts, all the Flyers banging their sticks and everything. And I'm not saying it doesn't matter how he plays, but I'm saying just him getting on the ice, I think, was a big plus. And I think afterwards, a lot of the Flyers were talking about that, and that might carry over into Game 7. The other thing I'll say, Alain Vigneault, he challenges that play. I thought the puck was kind of in the net, frankly, before there was any interference.
It was.
So that was a mistake, because when you get the power play and you give up a goal, this happened in the prior game where they killed the penalty, but in this game, they scored the goal, and even they showed Alain Vigneault after the goal, and he's Mr. Smooth, man. We've talked about this. He doesn't get too high. He doesn't get too low. And they stayed the course, and, that's a humongous win in overtime, of course.
Well, I'll put you on the spot. I actually it's funny because the Islanders seem to be the consensus favorite. They're a 6 seed. The Flyers are the 1 seed, but we know the Islanders probably a little better skilled, and they've been really, more dominant with puck possession and putting pucks on net and whatnot. But the Flyers are the top seed. I like the momentum of the Flyers, and if it goes to overtime, I'm going with the orange and black. I said before the series, Flyers in 7, so I got to stick with them. What do you think?
I'll say what I said when we had the conversation about the back-to-backs. Should Carter Hart start or not? And I'll say if Carter Hart starts, which he will, I like the Flyers as well.
All right, sounds good. Couple other 3-1 deficits erased in the NHL. The Avs. I mean, it's going to be a great weekend. The Avs are taking their series to a Game 7 against Dallas, and of course, the Knights let the Vancouver Canucks, your team, you're probably your odds-on favorite team, come back tied at 3. Who do you like in those games?
I like the Canucks. I like these teams to come back from 3-1. I know the statistics probably are you losing 7 if you're down 3-1, but I like the Flyers. I like the Canucks. I think the Canucks are real good. It's kind of under the radar, even for us in the East. They're out in the West, and they're out in the West bubble as well now in Edmonton.
Right.
But I think the Canucks are really good. And these other teams, the Islanders, Barry Trotz is a great coach. We both know that. But I think you kind of start looking over your shoulder. I think the Flyers do have the Oscar momentum, if you will, and I think that means something. But I think the Canucks as well, they're tough. And I don't know why it is, but the West always seems bigger and stronger than the East. When you watch the 2 games, it's really interesting. You know, I can go back to when the Kings killed the Rangers. They were just so much bigger and stronger, 2014. But for whatever reason, the West seems to always be bigger, stronger. And I guess the East, you can say, is a little quicker and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, to me, all these games come down to goaltending, because that's the name of the game in hockey, as you know.
Yes, it is. And teams who have had a 3-1 lead in their respective series in the NHL have gone on to win the series 90% of the time.
Right. That's
just letting you know, 90% of the time. So we'll see if the Flyers and the Avs and the Canucks can buck that trend. We shall see. Good stuff. Hey, let's talk about the NBA a little bit, because some crazy stuff going on there. The Raptors were just about looking into the abyss last night, and they saved their season with a 3-pointer at the buzzer. Can they come back in this series? Was that a series-saving bucket, or was just delaying the inevitable?
I picked the Raptors to come out of the East, so I'm a little on the wrong side of that, I think, because even when you watch that game, and look, Anunoby of all people, they kind of left him alone, but not really. Jaylen Brown actually contested that shot. I thought it was almost kind of a catch and fling point, 0.5 left. And it was incredible that he made it to me. But I don't, I still want the Raptors to win. I still think they're great. But, the Celtics have 4 or 5 excellent players. I don't know if Tatum's a superstar or not, but they got, Walker and Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they got players. So I think it's going to be very, very hard. I'll be rooting for the Raptors only because I picked them to make the finals. And Nick Nurse is the coach of the year this year, given the fact they lost Kawhi and they're still, hanging around. But my goodness, they were very, very, very fortunate. And I'm not taking anything away from the shot. But think of it, they put the 7'7" guy on the inbounds, Taco, right? That's his name. And Lowry after the game said it was all Anunoby, it wasn't me, but that's an incredible, think how far that pass must have gone, 45 feet.
45 feet across the court.
Over a 7'7" guy.
Yeah.
So you're right, though. That shot doesn't go in, and I don't know when they do these percentages of shots, but it was probably like 5% it was going to go in, maybe. The series is over. It's 3-0. So I just haven't seen enough. As good as Lowry is, on that final play before, when I think it was Tice got the dunk after Kemba Walker dribbled in around 3 guys, and Lowry is looking at Siakam, who's become a star. He's got his hands out like, what were you doing? And if you watch the replay, Siakam was caught between a rock and a hard place. And you probably should have gone to the lower guy and then make this guy make a 12-footer, but that was his choice. And for Lowry to do that, I don't like that. I'm not even saying Lowry was wrong, but you don't show up a teammate like that, even if you're the man. And Lowry's the man now. He had 31 last night. But again, all's forgotten when you win the damn game, and they won the game. So we'll see what happens. But I think it's going to be very difficult for the Raptors. I'm rooting for them, but very difficult for the Raptors because they really should be down 3-0.
They really should be. I mentioned to you last night, there's no real reason I have 2 TVs in my family room. It's a long story, but I do. So once in a while, if the family's watching a movie, I'll put the sound down and watch the hockey game and pretend I'm watching the movie. Last night would have been a perfect night to watch basketball and hockey, but my TV was freezing, so I had to turn on the other side of hockey on both. He hit that shot, the three-pointer, at exactly the moment that Scott Lawton scored that goal. I have to tell you because I just missed it. And a friend texted me, he just missed it. So, yeah, it was great stuff. A lot of stuff going on in the NBA and the NHL last night simultaneously. But I have to say the bigger story has been Jimmy Butler leaving the Sixers, goes to the Heat, teams over with Eric Spoelstra, Pat Riley, and that crew. And my team, the Bucks, I mean, I still have the Clippers going all the way as you do, but I thought the Bucks would have, not an easy time, but they'd cruise to the finals. They're down 2-0 to the Heat, 40 points for Butler the other night.
Look, we talked about Jimmy Butler. I think he took a look in Philly and said, I could be the alpha dog, but these two guys, I don't know if I can win with them. It had to be, but I thought he was nuts to go to Miami because it was Miami. But now you look at him and look, I think you want Butler on your team. Obviously, he didn't want to stay.
He didn't want to stay, right?
Which is a big loss to the Sixers.
Yeah.
But right now, he made the right decision. Not that they're going to win, even though they're winning now. But, that team looks like they're going to be pretty good for a bunch of years. And I think Butler's found his home. I give him a lot of credit, though. He's a tough guy. He's the old you want him on your team. And I wouldn't think he could even score 40. I know he's a real good player and he can score the ball, but my goodness, to score 40 in the playoff game. And I have to say, things have been weird about the bubble. We'll talk maybe briefly about Utah, Denver when we get to Denver Clippers. But it just seems to me that certain guys can just light it up incredibly. And I wonder about like the gyms down there. Nobody ever played in them really before they came to the bubble. And they played, the 7 or 8 games, whatever it was that they played. And now they're in the playoffs. But I don't think you've really seen guys who are lighting it up then totally lose it. We'll talk about Game 7 with Murray and Donovan Mitchell, of course. But my goodness, it just seems some guys light it up there and some guys can't throw the ball in the ocean there. It's really interesting. I think when it's all over, somebody will write like an analysis of this. But it just seems different. Plus, of course, you're not going into your house and then going to their house and then coming back to your house. So that's a big difference. And I still think no fans is a bit of a difference. I don't know if it's a big difference anymore.
Sure. You mentioned, talk about that Game 7. It was a wild Game 7, Donovan Mitchell and, that crew. Talk about that game and how do you like them, Denver matching up against the Clippers?
Well, I love the Clippers, and now we've already seen one game, and that was a blowout. I think the Clippers were in trouble early, and then Paul George finally became Paul George, and that became not a series. Now they get back Beverly, who I think is the key to them winning a championship because he's such a good defender. But the Denver-Utah series where, you had one or the other or both scoring 50, it seemed like almost every game. I know it wasn't every game, Murray and Mitchell back and forth. And Murray pretty much disappeared in Game 7, as some guys do. I'm not saying that Murray isn't a star player. He is. But I think Game 7 gets the guys sometimes. And to Murray's credit, down the stretch, he made that little bank shot, and then he scored that layup. Those were 2 big baskets, but he had open shots that he was making with his eyes closed earlier in the series, and he really couldn't make an outside shot. But down the stretch, in one of the dumbest plays of all time, when they finally steal so they're up 2. Denver's up 2. They steal the ball. They go the length of the court. It's like a 3-on-1, but there's 5 seconds left in the game, 6 seconds left in the game. So where are you going to the basket? He drops it off. I don't even remember the who for a layup that he misses. And, people tell me that's a 90% shot. Yeah, that's great until you miss it. And then Conley got a pretty good look at a 3, and the ball literally rimmed around the basket and came out. That goes in, they win. And it would have been a crushing defeat for Denver. So I thought they were fortunate. But, Jokic, the Joker, he's unbelievable. He made that beautiful move on Gobert down low to give them the lead with whatever seconds it was left. It was, very late in the game. And I give him a lot of credit, 30 points, 14 rebounds. I haven't seen I lost a lot of weight. I'm going to be more athletic, Jokic. But
right.
Doesn't matter. They won the game. I don't think they can beat the Clippers. And the Clippers showed that last night, 120-97. You know what I think of Kawhi? He's still, to me, the best player in the league the last 3 years. He won't win the MVP this year, but he might win the MVP in the playoffs, which is more important. He's already got 2 of those, so nothing's going to scare him. But to me, still the key to the Clippers winning the championship is getting Beverly back, which they just did. But really, Paul George has to be Paul George. We talk about big stars, LeBron and AD. But when you say Kawhi and Paul George, you're saying Kawhi and who? Because now he had a great game at the end after being horrific in 2, 3, and 4 in the prior series. But my goodness, he's going to have to play like Paul George. He played pretty good last night. You know, he didn't have to play great last night because it was a blowout.
Right.
And I'll say it again, with Beverly back finally, he missed the whole prior series. With him back finally, they're pretty much a complete team. I don't think this is going to be a difficult series. They can get 4 or 5 games playing together, which is what they need. You know, still with all the injuries, and I understand COVID, you know, stopped for a few months. These guys have not played a lot together. But I think now they'll have the chance to play in high pressure situations in the playoffs. And I still think, as I'm sure you do, that Lakers Clippers to me is the NBA Finals. And I'd be shocked if it doesn't happen to be Lakers Clippers in the Western Conference Finals.
I agree. Can the Rockets make some noise though with the Lakers? Every time you have James Harden, you never know.
Yeah, I think. And by the way, he was another one who was horrible the other day in Game 7. Maybe a little noise. Look, the knock on the Lakers, and it's becoming apparent, is they really are kind of they're not a deep team. They need AD and LeBron to be superstars. If one of them plays poorly, they're going to lose. I don't think they've shot the ball particularly well, the other guys on the team. But I still think, look, I can't say that Kawhi and Paul George are the 2 of the top 5 or now even 10 players in the league the way George has played. But you can say LeBron and AD are 2 of the top 5 or 6 players in the league. And if anything, Davis is more important. They're going to cheat to LeBron. The Rockets are a small team, you know that. So AD is going to have his way. So I don't think they can. The Rockets are just that run and gun team. Always the criticism of D'Antoni teams, right? They can't get over the hump in the playoffs. And I don't think this year is going to be any different.
Let's switch to baseball a little bit because, I buried my Phillies a long time ago. You did not. To your credit, you talked about how weak the division is in the East. Not only is it weak, but don't look now. The Phillies have won 9 of 10. I know they got a little help in the bullpen via trade. They're 18-15, 2.5 behind the Braves. Remember, you don't have to win the division to get in the playoffs in this playoff series with 16 teams making it. What are your thoughts now of the landscape now that they're halfway through and the second half of the season? And here we go.
I don't know if you saw this thing. I just saw it on SportsCenter last night. After the Phillies lost 5 in a row, they interviewed Bryce Harper, who's really down in the dumps. And he goes, not a lot of games. We got to boo. And he said, quote, we got to go on a streak. We got to win 9 of 10. And then yesterday they went next innings and it's 9 to 10.
Yeah.
But as I said, even with Atlanta up top, Soroka's gone for the year. Max Fried is a great pitcher. They're number 2, who's now their number 1. And they got some young guys who are pitching pretty well. But for Soroka to be gone, tearing his Achilles just trying to cover first, he didn't even get 2 steps off the mound. And he's gone for the year. He really is a legit number 1. To lose him, I'll say it again, I think it opens it up for the Phillies. The Phillies have to pitch better. We love Jake Arrieta. He did what he did with his elbow last year, and he got surgery, and he's only been so-so. The starting pitcher, and of course, especially their relievers, have to get better. But, they do have that lineup, with guys like Rio Muto and Harper, McCutchen. They do have a really good lineup. And I'll say it again, I think it's pretty much, at least in my view, a toss-up in that division because everybody, no matter where you go, the Mets would lose in their pitchers. Wherever you go, there's really not enough pitching. So even though I would say, and you would say, the Phillies are pitching poor, and I don't mean pitching poorly, I mean pitching poor. They don't have enough pitchers. Well, they're pitching poorly also. But so is every other team in the division, Joe. That's the beauty, at least, of making the playoffs, because right now the Phillies are in second, and they're playing as well as they can play. And I like Joe Girardi because, like Alain Vigneault, frankly, he's never going to be the panicky, screaming, yelling, it's your fault, you got to do better. He might do that behind closed doors because he seemed to do that on the Yankees with Sanchez when Sanchez couldn't block a ball, and he was leading the league in pass balls. And he's a little better now, but Girardi, like Vigneault, is not going to call you out publicly. And I think athletes, especially today, I think always, but athletes today appreciate that more because they don't want to look bad in public. And that's a thing now. I don't know if it was a thing 20 or 30 years ago, but it wasn't as big a thing
Right.
as it is now. So that's the new wave of coaching. I know we'll talk about Steve Nash and the Nets in a little bit, but the new wave of coaching is not to do that. And I think if you do that, unless you win, you'll be gone quickly now in today's all sports, in today's sports world.
I agree. Now, what's going on with the Yankees? They've dropped to third now. They're tied with the Blue Jays, 5 back of the Rays. For most of the season, they were at the top. What's going on with them?
Stanton, once again, can't get on the field. Whatever you think of him, I don't think he's a hitter like Judge is. I think he's a mistake hitter. If you throw him a fastball down the middle, he'll hit it 460. But he hardly played last year. Now he's hardly played this year. When they go, he's a couple weeks away. That's like, a quarter of the season now? If you're a couple of weeks away.
Right.
Aaron Judge also, unfortunately, look, you got these big-bodied guys. They're strong, they're big, they're powerful. But any little thing when they get hurt, they get hurt. So I will say this, the Yankees, unlike last year, where they had similar injuries and every guy that Boone put in played great, this year, everybody is not playing great. Although my favorite Yankee, LeMahieu, I think he's the guy who might be able to hit 400. Now, he missed a bunch of games too. But he's got a chance, I think, to hit 400. But for whatever reason, Tampa Bay has their number, and I didn't think it would be that lopsided. And then the Mets yesterday on, remembering Tom Seaver, who passed away earlier this week. We'll talk about him a little later. They had an incredible come from behind. Chapman had the COVID. He came back late. He hasn't been Chapman. I don't know if he threw at that guy's head or not on Tampa Bay, but he got a 3-game suspension that he still hasn't served. And unfortunately, now when he's coming in, he's given up a couple of big-time home runs. And he has that grin on his face that's not really a grin. I guess that's the reaction, but it looks like he's smiling or laughing after he gives up game-tying homers. So he gave up a game-tying homer. They got him out of the game. And the next inning, Pete Alonso hits a 2-run homer, which became like the ghost of Tom Seaver. Tom Seaver's up there watching us, smiling. And look, I think that gives you some momentum too. Tom Seaver, the greatest Met by 20 miles. Anybody who says many consider him to be, or he may have been the greatest Met, no. Tom Seaver's number one, and it's like 2 miles back to whoever, maybe Piazza or whoever, is number 2. So the Yankees just don't have the late inning. They were automatic in the bullpen last year. Canley's out for the season. Chapman came back late and hasn't certainly been Chapman, and it's getting late very early. The Yankees will find a way to make the playoffs, but if they don't get healthy, unlike last year, they didn't win the World Series last year, but unlike last year when whoever Boone put in, Gio Urshela hit over 300 and he's like a 250 lifetime hitter, whoever they put in. But I don't know about Stanton coming back, but they need Judge in the lineup because Judge is an excellent hitter. To me, he's not just a mistake hitter. Stanton's more of a mistake hitter, but he's just, I don't know, too ripped because every injury he gets, he's not out for 2 days. He's out for 2 weeks. And again, 2 weeks is 15 games, is a quarter of the season now. So that's a big problem. And their bullpen is not locked down like it was last year.
Let's talk about.
I'm sorry. One more thing.
Yeah.
Eric Cole, the $325 million man, with all those victories in a row, or he didn't lose in like 28 straight starts or whatever, the last 2 outings, he's been in trouble. And he's such an outgoing guy. After the game, he's happy to talk to you, but it's to me like he's kind of looking for something that he hasn't had to look for in over a year because he's pitching so well. So also, losing him as a lockdown, I can't lose starter, that hurts the Yankees as well. Sorry, go right ahead, Joe.
No, that's okay. I was going to go back talk about what you mentioned earlier. Steve Nash, coach of the Brooklyn Nets. Some like it, some don't. Some call it white privilege. Some call it not white privilege. But what are your thoughts on the Hall of Famer and that coach of the Nets?
That Canadian privilege? No, I don't think it's that at all. Look, Steve Nash, and maybe people forgot, but Steve Nash, back-to-back MVPs, just an incredible player, an incredible athlete. He credits soccer when you talk about having kids, should they specialize, but he credits playing a lot of soccer originally. He loves soccer as well. But here's what's happening now. I think because of Steve Kerr. Now, Steve Kerr was a nice player in the NBA, right? He made some big shots getting past.
Yes, he did.
But Steve Nash was a star. And never got over the hump in Phoenix, of course. But I will say this. I think the reason he got hired is he's never coached, but he was, he was a consultant for 5 years with Golden State, established a relationship with Kevin Durant. I don't know if the rumors are Durant had something to do with it or not. You'll never convince me they didn't run it by Durant.
Right.
What about Steve Nash? And Durant had to have a positive reaction from the years that he was at Golden State when Nash was an advisor or a consultant or whatever he was. So I think he's going to have enough help. They're keeping Jacques Vaughn, who I think is a good basketball guy. But the most interesting thing of all to me is, aside from the actual hiring, which is a big deal, nobody had a clue. You never heard his name mentioned.
Never.
Anything. So it's interesting in this world of social media and everybody's got a camera and everybody's listening to everything. You can put something over like this, but I don't think it's white privilege at all. I think this is NBA star privilege. And as you know, the other thing, for whatever reason, big guys, big centers don't get the chance. And it always seems to go to point guards or guards who seem to be, look, Doc Rivers, right? I mean, it just seems to be guys. And I agree, the point guard is the quarterback. He's the catcher. He's the head guy. So I think this is a good hire. And I use Steve Kerr. Now, I don't know how great a coach Steve Kerr was when he walked in, but he had the best team. And now he's developed into a really, really top coach. You see a guy like Spoelstra after LeBron leaves, he's a really, really, really good coach.
Really good coach.
Maybe Jimmy Butler saw something. So I think it's a good hire. I think it's fine. I don't think it's white privilege. I think it's back-to-back MVPs privilege. And raise your hand, how many of those guys are there? The answer is very, very few.
Very, very few. All right. Don't like to leave on a down note, but we're going to close with, we can certainly celebrate what he did in his career because he was certainly iconic. The great John Thompson of Georgetown took his team to 3 straight national championship game, or 3 games in 4 years. When Patrick was there, he won 1. He beat Houston, lost to Carolina and Villanova. And, certainly his son coached. Patrick Ewing became the coach. He died this past week. Your thoughts on the legacy that John Thompson left behind?
Yeah, well, John Thompson, didn't like the fact, first African-American coach, the way he said, no, I'm the first coach from New England to win a national championship.
Yeah, right.
But, you go way back and this, he was Bill Russell's backup for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
So think of the history this guy is walking in to be a coach of any color, to be Bill Russell's backup and be around those great Celtics teams when they were the biggest dominant dynasty in the history of sport, period, right? 8 titles in a row, whatever they won. So that kind of set him up. He was fortunate to get Ewing because that kind of made him a star coach, but he was an excellent coach. He didn't want to play at Georgetown, right? Because they were always so tough. Your Villanova guys in I won't say the greatest upset ever. I'll say the most perfect game ever played in the final by Villanova.
I'll give you that.
That's why they won. To me, it was never a great upset because they had played them tough twice during the year, once in overtime.
Yeah.
Thompson was a great coach, a great recruiter. A lot of people didn't like him because he was too edgy. They were too tough. They were thugs. That became the first. They were certainly the Fab Five before the Fab Five was, the Fab 5 years later.
Yeah.
But, to have the players he's had, the big men he's had, Alonzo Mourning comes to mind in addition to Ewing. So I thought he was a great coach. I didn't think he was a great commentator, but that's a different story. But, he did what he did, and he was the first. And all I can say is great recruiter, great coach, great representative for his race, even though he might be mad if he heard me say that. But really, Thompson was kind of up there and was the first of a kind. And when he won the national championship, you'll recall, and give him credit for this, he said, I'm the first, but there's a lot of guys who came before me who didn't get the chance to really coach at that level, and they didn't get the chance to coach at that level. So I give him a lot of credit for that. But at the end of the day, great coach, great career, and did a lot for African-American players, not just on the court, but, you were his son for life if you played for him. I did want to say a few things about Tom Seaver because I didn't really get into him. If that's okay. Seaver, the greatest Met ever, as I said, but just briefly now, Joe, 3,640 strikeouts, 6th all time, 311 wins. Pitched in the 5-man rotation. Jim Cott told me way back in 2000 that the first time they went to a 5-man rotation were the Mets in those late 60s years to protect Kuzman and Gentry and Seaver. And Ryan was a reliever starting to start, but that helped. If you look at Seaver, he only had 35 starts a year, and you'd have 41 in the 4-man rotation. So my point is he could have won more games. And I went through in more detail, which I won't. The first 2 years here, 16-12, 16-13 on a team that lost 101 games in 89 games.
Wow.
And then the third year, 25-7, he won 25% of their games every year the first 3 years, whether they won 61 games or 100 games, which they did, or 101 when they won the pennant in 69. So Seaver was a god among the Mets. He's the best Met by 10 miles, like I said before. Had the perfect game for 8 1/3 with the Cubs. Jimmy Qualls, that's all you have to say. Jimmy Qualls got that single to the left center and struck out 19 Padres, which is no longer the record. Guys have thrown 20, but he struck out the last 10, and nobody's ever struck out 10 in a row. Became a well-known vintner, went out to California. Said at the end he had dementia, had COVID at the very end, but still the greatest Met who ever lived, and I'm sure I've left out a bunch of stuff, but Tom Seaver, one of the greatest pitchers of all time, had the highest percentage, 98.6, I think, or 98.8, until Griffey, Mariano, and Jeter came in recently. But he had the highest percentage ever. How anybody left any of these guys off the ballot is a different question for another time. But one of the greatest pitchers who ever lived, in my opinion. Got his no-hitter with the White Sox, not the Mets.
Well said, my friend. Hey, great stuff as usual. We'll be back next week. Of course, you are the sports editor of WestchesterCountyPost.com. You can check out Steve's videos and his articles there. He's also he has a Facebook forum called Speaking of Sports with Steve Kallas. You can follow me on Twitter at JoeStaszak975. I'm actually off this weekend, taking the kids to the shore. I'll be back next weekend for Eagles post game, 7 o'clock on Sunday. Hopefully Steve will join me. We'll be talking Redskins. Sorry, not the Redskins. The Washington football team. I know I'm going to be doing that a lot this year. Sorry about that. The Washington football team open with the Eagles, and they're banged up. We'll see how, if the Eagles can get a little healthier as the season gets a little closer. Great job, Steve, as usual. Appreciate everyone for listening and for certainly clicking on. You can follow this on my Facebook page, and we are on YouTube, also on WestchesterCountyPost.com. You can find this podcast every week. Appreciate it, folks. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend. Stay healthy. Stay safe. We'll see you next week.
Always a pleasure, Joe.
You too, pal. Good stuff. Let me